Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to have the webinar that we already did 2 weeks ago, but this time in English. Before we're going to start, I would like to have a couple of small announcements. Please keep your microphone off and also keep your camera off. I'm going to get the presentation up. So today we're going to talk about changes in CLP legislations that are introduced in ATP 19 and ATP 20. And before I'm going to talk about these changes, I would like to explain a little bit what reprotoxic substances are. Why? Because these changes apply to these type of substances. So reprotoxic substances, these are substances with a potential effect on the reproduction and the development of an unborn child. And an ATP 19 and 20, like I just said, are applicable to these type of substances that are indeed reprotoxic. And they have the following classification. So for reprotoxic substances, we have category 1 and 2. And in this case, we're looking more at the reprotoxic substances of category 1. So H360FD category 1 has the hazard statement may damage the fertility and may harm the unborn child. And we also have the classification of H360D category 1 may harm the unborn child. So what are normally the classification method for mixtures containing these reprotoxic substances? So if we have a mixture with multiple substances that have this classification, so H360 category 1, then we have to look at the individual substances that are reprotoxic. And if the concentration of each individual substance is higher than 0.3%, then the mixture will also be classified for reprotoxic of category 1. So that means that if all substances with this classification individually in the mixture remain below 0.3%, then the mixture remains unclassified. So these are the normal classification methods for mixtures with these reprotoxic substances. However, with the changes that are described in ATP 19 and 20, there are certain substances that will have a different way of classifying these mixtures. So there are 3 different nodes, node 11, node 12, and node X. And we're going to start with node 11. So node 11 says something about the classification of a mixture for reprotoxicity, that we have to look at the boron compounds that have these node 11, and if the sum of these boron compounds is equal or higher than 0.23%, then the mixture will be classified for reprotoxicity. So which boron compounds have these node 11 introduced in ATP 20? There are 8 different boron compounds, and we have 2 examples mentioned here. On the left side, you can see boric acid, and on the right side, you see the molecule structure of diboron trioxide. So let's see what this node has, what kind of influence it can have on the classification of a mixture. So I have an example. So before ATP 19 and 20 is applicable, we have an example here with a mixture of 3 different substances. So the boric acid, for example, that I just showed before, the diboron trioxide, and another one, disodium tetraborate. And they all 3 have the classification of H360FD as a reprotoxic of category 1. And if we look at the classification of the mixture, we have to look at each individual substance and if the concentration is equal or higher than 0.3%. If not, so in this case, they all are below 0.3%, then the mixture will remain unclassified for this hazard. But if we're going to apply ATP 19 and 20 for this for the same mixture, we see that these three different substances actually now have node 11. So what is the influence then on the classification of the mixture? In this case, we have to look at all these three substances, and we have to sum the concentration. And if the sum of the concentration is higher or equal to 0.3%, then in this case now the classification of the mixture will be reprotoxic category 1, H360FD. In practice, what does it mean? So, for example, how does the labeling look like? We will now have a pictogram that has to be mentioned, the GHS08. As you can see on the right side, we have to mention the signal word danger, and we have the hazard statement may damage fertility and may damage the unborn child. So it's quite a big difference if you would look before ATP 19 and 20 and when ATP 19 and 20 is in force. Now, if you're going to look at another node, that's node 12, so that's also newly introduced in ATP 19. It's quite similar to node 11. In this case, we're not going to look at individual entries that will have this change of how to classify a mixture with these type of reprotoxic substances, but we are going to look at a group entry. So all substances that are within this group entry, we have to look at the sum of the concentration and see if it indeed has exceeds the generic or the specific concentration limit. So for the toxicity for category 1, it's 0.3%. An example, so at the moment, there's only one group entry that has this node, node 12, is the 2-ethyl hexanoic acid and its salts. So as you can see in the description of the group entry, it is not a specific substance because it mentions and its salts. So everything that has these salts and the 2-ethyl hexanoic acid is applicable within this group entry. So an example, of course, is the 2-ethyl hexanoic acid itself. But another one that is within this group entry is this example on the right, dibutyl tin bis 2-ethyl hexanoate. And the classification for this group entry is H360D. So may harm the unborn child. So we're going to look at an example again. So before ATP 19 and 20, if we would have a mixture with these two substances, we see that the above substances each have a concentration below 0.3%. And that means that the classification of the mixture remains unclassified. However, now with ATP 19 and 20, these two substances are within the same group entry and node 12 is applicable. That means that we have to sum the concentration of these substances, and that's higher than 0.2%. So the mixture is also classified for H360D. So again, we have the pictogram that is applicable for this mixture. We have the signal word danger and also the hazard statement may harm the unborn child now on the label of this product. So note 11 and 12 are quite comparable. However, we also have a third node, node X. And it's written here. The classification applies for a group entry only is applicable for the common part, but the non-common part needs to be evaluated and can actually lead to a broader scope of this same classification, or it can even lead to a more severe classification. So For example, if a group entry normally has the classification H319, but the non-common part within this substance could actually lead to a higher classification, or to a more severe classification, and that would be H318 category 1. So an example, so in this case, again, Note X is only applicable at the moment to this group entry, the same group entry where Note 12 is applied to. We can see here an example of a substance which has the ethyl hexanoic acid part, so that has the classification H360D, may harm the unborn child. But the salt part, so the uncommon part of this substance, actually leads to the broader scope of the same classification. So instead of having the classification H360D, may harm the unborn child, also additionally, we have the hazard statement, may damage the fertility, H360DF. And that is, broader scope of the same classification. So these are the 3 different notes, and I also had a couple of examples where these notes are applied to. But what are the actual consequences then? So as you already saw in examples, the classification of the final product may have been changed to reprotoxic category 1, compared to if ATP 19 and 20 were not enforced yet. And that means actually if you would sell this product to the consumer, and now it will have this classification, reprotoxic category 1, then you're restricted to sell it to the consumer. And that's described in the REACH legislation restriction 30. We also expect that in the future we have more group entries that have these nodes. So for example, the node X with the common and the uncommon part, that we have to look at the classification. At the moment, it's only 1 group entry, but later on, we can maybe expect that more group entries will have this node. Well, when is we have to apply ATP 19 and 20. ATP 19 and 20 is already in force. However, there's always a transition period where you can still keep the old classification. However, it's also the time to maybe look at a replacement of these substances within your product and change the recipe, or after this transition of you actually have to classify these products following ATP 19 and 20, and that's on 1 February 2025. So that's in a nutshell the changes in ATP 19 and 20. So if you have any questions, you could have put them in the chat box. So I'm gonna ask Ivo if there are any questions asked in the chat box.
Yes, actually there is one. We got a question regarding the F and D, which have been added to the classification of reprotoxic. In the ATPs, the ATP doesn't discuss if they need to be both F or both D, so both for fertility or both for development. So what will the outcome be if multiple ingredients will come to a conclusion which where one has fertility and one has development? What will be the end? Will it be development and fertility, or only fertility?
In that case, we would recommend to have F and D, because it's always better to have, in this case, the worst case, because there's no explicit rules for F and D when to apply D and these two if they are together, as far as I know. So maybe correct me if I'm wrong.
No, not correct you if I'm wrong. It's FD, like it is in the standard classification for reprotoxic. It would also be FD in this case. Yeah. Those were the questions.
Great. So if you still have any questions after this webinar, you can always contact us. So you can call us, that's no problem, or you can just email us. And if it's a bit more explanation necessary, you can always ask for a consultation, and then we can arrange something with you, and we can always try to find a solution. So with this, I would like to say have a good day, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. Thank you.